So Professor Morandi has to educate Piers Morgan once again. You have to remember Professor Morandi is from Iran, lives in Iran, teaches at Tehran University, but somehow, for whatever reason, Piers Morgan seems to think that he knows more about Professor Morandi's own country than Professor Morandi does. So, of course, after the death of the president of Iran, here's Piers Morgan thinking he knows it all. Let's jump right in.
First of all, your reaction to the death of the president yesterday.
Obviously, everyone that I know is in mourning. He was a very popular figure. He was a very humble person, very different from the description that you gave. He worked very hard for the deprived, the working class, the disenfranchised. He traveled from city to city, from town to town. He was constantly visiting the different provinces. And that's why he was so popular among, especially, as I said, the more disenfranchised and middle class, lower middle class Iranians.
I mean, you painted what many would view as a ridiculous picture of a man dubbed the Butcher of Tehran, somebody whose death was greeted by many women posting images of themselves celebrating his death because of the appalling suppression that he put them under. And we know that he was responsible for the deaths of many thousands of political prisoners. So I don't quite categorize him as the person that you're trying to describe to us.
Pause for just a second here. So I do want to chime in for just a second. I did interview Professor Morandi. I did talk to him about the concerns that have come from some women that are either from Iran or are still in Iran. I can tell you there are people that I know who I will not name here, but there are women that I know that are from Iran and they are not happy with the current regime in Iran. I could send them the interview that I did with Professor Morandi, but it is honestly gotten to the point where for me, it's not worth my time to try to push back against that argument anymore, because it has been made very clear to me that they are not going to change their position about this particular issue. So sometimes I just let things be as they are, right? But I think what Piers Morgan tends to do is when it comes to certain countries, right? When it comes to Iran, when it comes to Gaza, right? He tends to try to elevate the worst, right? So he tends to focus on the most horrible things that people have said about that group of people. But if you notice, he won't do that with Israel. He will ignore that when it comes to Israel. He'll only focus on, well, do you condemn Hamas, right? So you have to understand what Piers Morgan is here to do and what is his role. His role is to make sure, again, that he is going to uplift the state of Israel. And any country or any group of people that is a threat to that, or what the West perceives to be a threat to that, he is going to try to smear. This is important for people to understand. You got to know where Pierce's checks are coming from. But Professor Morandi responds.
Well, obviously, what you're saying is inaccurate, to say the least. I would say the butchers are in London, in Washington, the people who destroyed Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen during the disgraceful genocide there, the dirty war in Syria, the destruction of Libya, the sanctions on Venezuela and Cuba. I think that the real monsters are actually much more closer to home. He was a part of the judiciary, and those people that you were saying were executed were, he wasn't executing people. He was in the judiciary at the time, and the people who you're alluding to, and the numbers are far less than what you claim, they're actually, this is something that your government should be ashamed of. These are people who fought against Iran. They fought for Saddam Hussein as foot soldiers. They betrayed the country. They carried out bomb attacks in this country, killing up to 17,000 people, including a president, a prime minister, and a head of judiciary. A bomb explosion near my house when I was a school student. I was getting ready to go to school. it killed 9 to 11 people, including an Armenian family of 4. These are the people who you're saying they were murdered by Iranians. No, in Iran, no one has any sympathy for the MEK terrorist organization, which today has a major base in Albania, and it has offices across Europe and North America. So it is your government that's supporting terrorism. It is your government and your governments that are really the brutal regimes that
Professor, you came on and said...
Let me start here. Not even just his government, but the West in particular. It is the West that continues to, bomb these countries, right? To starve these countries, putting sanctions on these countries. It's the West that tends to do these things. This is why people like Tulsi Gabbard and her crazy ass, I guess I should say her flip-flopping ass. This is why she always comes up. She just pops up all of a sudden when people tend to speak out against Israel, right? And they're speaking out in support for the Palestinian people. And they're starting to do their own research, and they're starting to realize, wait a minute now, some of these countries that our history books told us were evil and bad, now that I've done my own research and I've looked into these countries myself, I've started to realize something. It was the United States. It was the West that made these countries what they are, that attacked these countries, that stole from these countries. It was the West that starved these countries by implementing sanctions on the people. It was the West that stole their oil. It was the West that has been terrorizing these countries for years. And that's when you see people like Tulsi Gabbard pop up and say, I've been trying to warn people about the danger of Islam and the spread of Islam and how it's gotten to our American kids, our innocent American kids. That's where people like her pop up. That's what they use people like Tulsi Gabbard for. But Tulsi Gabbard knows damn well, especially since Tulsi Gabbard is also a soldier, Tulsi knows what's really happening in those countries. Tulsi knows what the West has done, but Tulsi Gabbard is paid to lie about that. Tulsi Gabbard is paid to tell you the opposite. And that's why a lot of people are in those positions that they're in government right now.
You came on and spun this sort of stuff last time with the same smirk that you're doing it with this time. And the reason I find the smirk so irksome is because everybody actually outside of your office right now is looking at this thinking, is this guy for real? Given that Iran's tentacles in terms of terrorism are very transparently flowing through the 3 H's, as I described them. Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas. We know that your country, Iran, through its regime, has been responsible for horrendous terrorism now for a very long time. Why do you expect people watching these interviews, when you do them, to just calmly believe you when you say that all the bad guys are everybody else and the downtrodden, oppressed, much misunderstood people are the Iranian regime that is despised by so many people in Iran itself?
No, and Iran will see during the funeral ceremonies how popular President Raisi was. Just like General Soleimani 4 years ago, people like you were saying the same thing about him. But we saw millions come to the street. Just because in the West you say this sort of thing doesn't mean that that's the reality on the ground over here. Hezbollah was a group that was created as a result of the Israeli regime's invasion of Lebanon. They went and captured the capital in 1982. Hezbollah was created as a result of this illegitimate and brutal occupation. They expelled the brutal apartheid ethno-supremacist regime from Lebanon. And Hamas and other groups in Palestine are the result of 76 years of oppression, ethnic cleansing, and brutality and apartheid from this same regime.
There it is. There it is. There it is, folks.
So when you speak about the Houthis or Ansar Allah, you're talking about a decade of genocide carried out by the Saudis and the Emiratis, who are your allies, and your governments were supporting them. Your government starved the people of Yemen to bring them to their knees, but you failed, and you failed today as well. So no, you cannot blame the victims. 9/11, we were told that Al-Qaeda carried out the attacks on the Twin Towers? Who was Al-Qaeda? They were working with you in Afghanistan. And then 10 years later in Syria and in Libya, Al-Qaeda was cooperating with you. We have an email from Jake Sullivan, February the 12th, 2012, where he sent to Hillary Clinton, where he said, in Syria, Al-Qaeda is on our side. The dirty war in Syria, the dirty war in Libya is yours. These are your crimes and you cannot escape from it. So we are the victims, and your ugly empire is guilty as it is guilty in the genocide today in Gaza.
Oh.
Ouch. Talk about telling Piers Morgan off to his face with just straight facts, man. He didn't have to call Piers any names. He didn't have to, yell at Piers. Notice how Professor Morandi is incredibly calm when he spits these facts towards Piers Morgan. And by the way, Piers Morgan knows some of these things. Again, his job, he is paid to uplift, obviously, the state of Israel and to smear Muslim countries, to smear actually anyone outside of the West. That's what he is. The Piers don't care about nobody. Like, come on. That's what he's there for. I told you this before. Working with Talk TV, you got to think about who owns Talk TV. That's Rupert Murdoch, same guy that owns Fox, right? Fox News. So again, also Rupert Murdoch, also proud Zionist. So you guys, this is all connected. He's not going to let someone come host this show that's saying, yay, free Palestine. That's why he's there.
I wonder how many people watching this around the world, and there'll be a lot, will look at the situation with the current Iranian regime and think the word victim is appropriate. And particularly given that President Raisi, that you paint such a idyllic picture of as a human being, somebody who only cared about the downtrodden. This is a man, of course, ordered tighter enforcement of Iran's hijab and chastity law, restricting women's dress and behavior. It was under those orders that 22-year-old Mahsa Amini was detained in September 2022 by Iran's morality police for wearing improper hijab and died 3 days later in hospital, sparking mass unrest. That doesn't sound like the kind of guy you're trying to describe to me. It sounds like a guy who is trying to dictate to women how they should dress, how they should behave. Do you understand that in the West, we look at that as reprehensible behavior?
So this is a question. This is something I did talk to Professor Morandi about. Is towards the end of our interview. I did talk to him about what are the laws in Iran for women, and are they required to wear the hijab and things like that. I also talked to him about the woman that Piers Morgan is referring to, and there were some things that Professor Morandi revealed to me about that particular individual that I had not heard. There was obviously some information that was left out of that story. Because after I had that interview with Professor Morandi, I did some research on my own too. And I was like, oh, well, there you go. I didn't know that, So this is how we learn. Doesn't mean I agree with all the laws and the rules. I don't believe there should be any religious state. I believe in separation of church and state. I don't believe that people should, have to be a part of a certain religion because of where they live. I feel like people should have the freedom to choose. I don't feel like the laws should be aligned with religion. I don't believe that. Right. So that's me. But I don't live there. That's my take. Listen to this, though.
No, in the West, you objectify women, you commodify women, and you sexualize women, and you have Epsteins and many Epsteins who control.
Well, we give women the freedom to dress how they wish.
Notice when he mentions Epstein, that's what he comes in. Watch.
Fucking mass unrest. That doesn't sound like the kind of guy you're trying to describe to me. It sounds like a guy who is trying to dictate to women how they should dress, how they should behave. Do you understand that in the West, we look at that as reprehensible behavior?
No, in the West, you objectify women, you commodify women, and you sexualize women, and you have Epsteins and many Epsteins who control.
Well, we give women the freedom to dress how they wish. Why would you decline them that freedom?
In Iran, we have
Notice that he happened to cut him off when he mentioned Epstein.
Women pilots, we have women scientists. My boss at the University of Tehran, the dean of my faculty is a woman. For the 21 years that I've been an academic at the University of Tehran, 17 and a half of those years, the dean of my faculty was one woman or another. Don't misrepresent Iran. It doesn't work anymore, Piers. Your Western empire is on the decline. The whole of the global South is witnessing the crimes that are being carried out by your regimes. And your declining regimes are now despised by your own people. You're crushing people, students who are protesting genocide. You're not even crushing students who are protesting your own government for something that they're doing at home. You're crushing students for protesting genocide in another country. But you can't tolerate that. And your media is controlled by a group of rich people. They control the narrative, and you call that a democracy. Your choice is either Hillary Clinton or Biden or Trump. And then when that decision is made, the whole of Europe, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand fall in line as good soldiers. You don't have democracies, so don't pretend that you are above Iran.
Out of interest, Professor.
You owe us.
Out of interest.
You owe us.
Out of interest. Do you think?
And what's funny is after everything that he says, there's like a smile. Like, I'm going to come back with that. The Oracle says, do I hear the professor to be telling Piers, yo, lies ain't working now? No, it's so true. Oh, my God.
Women should have freedom to dress how they wish?
That is not your concern.
I'm asking you a question. I'm asking you a question.
That is not your concern.
Do you have an answer for me or not?
Women should have a freedom to dress within the cultural context of every society. Women and men do not have the freedom to dress any way they like in your country. So different societies have different cultures.
Actually, we do. I can dress how the hell I like.
Well, no, you cannot. You can then take off your clothes right now in front of the camera. Don't talk nonsense.
I can take my clothes.
Don't do it. Keep those clothes on. But no, it's I mean, technically, no, we don't have the right to dress however we wish, right? There are dress codes, right? Some of you work at a job, you work for certain companies where there is a dress code where you may have to wear business attire, right? Like I couldn't, even in my, when I was still working at university, I couldn't just show up in a bathing suit. Like, like we do have rules. We do have dress codes as well. So, but no, Piers, keep the clothes on. Keep them on.
Off if I wanted to.
Every society has its own culture. We don't follow.
But just to be clear, I mean, you're trying to avoid the question. Just to be clear.
I'm not.
Well, let me ask you the question again. You're a smart guy. You're a professor, and you're full of the ills of the West. Do you think women should be free to dress how they like?
No, I told you. I told you very clearly.
You don't agree.
Women should have the freedom to dress the way they like, but in our culture, the sexualization, objectification, and commodification of women is unacceptable. It is your society that drives and pushes women.
Got it. I'll get you another lecture about my society. But just to be clear, what you mean is you would like to. You don't think they should, do you?
Women are pilots. Most of my university students are women. The last person who we hired in my department was a woman. I am an affiliate in another department as well at the University of Tehran. The last two people we hired as academics there are women too. You cannot misrepresent Iran.
I simply asked you, Professor, if you felt women should have the freedom to dress how they wish, and you cannot answer me because actually you don't think they should.
No, because I didn't. They should be free to dress as they like within the cultural and religious context.
And just to be clear, just one moment. And just to be okay, you can keep shouting, or you can answer my question. Just to be clear, that would be within the realm of Iran's hijab and chastity law, would it?
I don't know the precise law, and I'm not going to get involved in that debate. It was
President Raisi who tightened enforcement of that law, so you must be aware of it. You're a professor. You're a very smart guy.
No, actually, I hope you're smart too. Mr. Racy did not tighten the law, or he didn't enforce it.
You just said you don't know anything about the law.
No, I don't know that.
You either know about it or you don't. Sounds like you're very well informed.
So let me jump in here. Let me break something down, right? So apparently this is a religious issue, right? So again, Professor Morandi explained this to me via interview. You know, the culture that is in Iran, obviously, like they have a certain dress requirement or whatever for women, etc. It is what it is. But I will also say there are groups in this country that have the same rule. It may not be, you know, hijab, but the Amish. So women that are Amish, they are not free to dress however they want unless they leave the Amish community, right? I told you guys when I was growing up back in the day for 1 year, and it only lasted 1 year. 1 year, I went to a Pentecostal church. We didn't have the freedom to dress however we wanted to. We had a very strict dress code. I told you guys about this on the call-in after show. We couldn't wear pants. We couldn't wear jewelry. We couldn't wear makeup. I told you it didn't last that long. So I had to go. Anywho, there are different religions, different organizations. Some people call them cults in this country that also have those same restrictions where you cannot just dress freely however you want to. So to that point, I don't hear Piers Morgan giving the same message to the Amish community. I don't hear Piers Morgan giving the same message to the Pentecostal community, depending on the type of Pentecostal. Some Pentecostal churches let women wear pants, but the one that I went to did not. I don't hear him giving that same type of thing, right? There are some, you know, groups or organizations or religious country where even your hair like is an issue. When I was at the Pentecostal church, we weren't allowed to cut our hair. So it's always kind of thing. So where's that same, I don't know, that same energy for those religions as well?
I know you're trying to escape the argument.
Actually, no, I'm just trying to ask you a simple question. The truth is, this guy you're trying to paint as some kind of saint, right, was somebody who led a draconian enforcement of how women in Iran dress, and that led to a young woman who was being detained by your morality police, and because she was wearing an improper hijab, and she died in hospital 3 days later, sparking mass unrest where more people got punished. That's the reality of this utopia you paint in Iran. It's a place that actually, far from encouraging women to be these great champions, as you put it, actually wants to suppress and control them. And that was led by President Raisi. But anyway,
you want to keep talking. You want to keep talking because you want to run out the clock, because we know quite well, and so do you, that your regime and your governments are the ones that are destroying our part of the world. And you're
Pause there for a second. That's a good point from Professor Morandi, but from Vatter Girl, braids and dreads still not allowed. Even in some of the school systems, we talked about this a couple of months ago. There were remember the kid in, I think this was Texas. Remember the kid in Texas that was suspended because he had braids in his hair? Like, so it's not as free as Piers is trying to make it sound. We have restrictions here too. I told you guys again, America is a conservative country. America is not left. You know, it's not progressive. There are progressive people, right? There are people who identify as socialists, but as a country, America is actually pretty conservative. If you travel across this country, you'll see it. You'll see it.
You're speaking about a law in Iran that most people accept, and that it is part of a different culture than yours.
Yeah.
But you think that our society and all other societies have to behave like yours. And that's not necessarily the case. And you think that necessarily because a woman wears a headscarf, that woman is somehow intellectually less, or that she's oppressed. That's your ignorance. I didn't
say that.
That is your ignorance.
No,
but
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
But women,
if a woman, let me be very clear to you. If a woman chooses to do that, that's fine. It's the idea of people like you endorsing a law that orders them to dress in a certain way. I find objectionable.
It isn't fine, because in the West, increasingly, women who have hijab are being sidelined. They're losing their jobs, whether it's in France, whether it's in England, and in other parts of Europe. So don't pretend that this is not the case. But in any case, women in Iran, whether they wear a headscarf or not, most of the university students in Iran are women, and women in Iran know how to deal with their rights much better than you. We don't need you, your government, and your filthy
Is that why they
regime.
all take to the streets to protest against the regime?
You
or
will see.
Am I imagining things again?
You will see women take to the streets during the funeral, and then I will wonder how are you going to explain that away? Or is it North Korea and how the evil mullahs are forcing people to come to the streets?
There's a lot of that. Yeah, a lot of that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what
there is. Yeah, when you have a morality police, you get told what your morals should be and how to behave. That's the point of a morality police. Anyway, we run out of time.
So, Piers, does Piers Morgan say anything about the women that have been fired from their jobs because they wear a hijab in the West, whether it's the UK or whether it's the United States? Does he say anything about those women then? No. So, something else I wanted to show you. We're going to play a little bit more here, and then I want to show you the funeral procession for President Raisi, because Piers was earlier on in this conversation, Piers was saying that obviously people were cheering that he has died. I want to show you what is actually happening.
We've run down the clock because I've given you more time than I intended to, Professor.
Just one final point. You have never been to Iran.
No.
You know nothing about Iran.
But I know many people who have.
No, you've never been to Iran.
And last time you came on this program, you tried to pretend that the regime has the widespread support of the Iranian people. It doesn't. It doesn't. Well, in fact, it's believed that as many as 80% of Iranian people loathe and despise your totalitarian regime.
In your wild dreams, that's the case. But you're the same person who gives a voice to the genocidal regime of Israel, and you advocate the devil.
Okay. Well, we're going to have a member of...
I wanted you to at least hear to that part because that was hilarious. And look at the big smile on his face. He said, "You advocate the devil." I'm sorry. I thought it's awesome. You can watch the full exchange on Piers Morgan's channel. But I do want to show you something else. Professor Morandi did post this on X here. He said, "This is Tehran right now, Piers. The funeral procession is so enormous that I can't get anywhere near the places you see in the video. I don't see people celebrating. Do you have the intellectual integrity to admit you were completely wrong?" So let's look at this here. I'm keeping it on mute because it has music. But you can see here. So this is the funeral procession for President Raisi in Iran. And so Piers was saying that people in Iran were cheering after President Raisi died. But remember, Professor Morandi is actually in Iran. So he's able to get this footage for us, right? So he's there. So he's just showing you, like, look at all these people. Look at all these people. That's a lot, huh? Yeah. That's a lot of people. Lot of people. And see, Western media is probably not going to show you this because Western media, they don't want you to see how many people actually came to the funeral procession. They don't want you to see that, right? So that's interesting for people to see. And then it wasn't just Professor Morandi. Richie Medhurst also, he was able to show some of the footage there as well. I'm at President Raisi's funeral in Tehran. Millions of people are in the streets. President Putin and Ismail Haniyeh have also come to pay their respects. Whatever Western media told you about Raisi being disliked in Iran is a lie. His passing is a loss for the entire world. So I just want to show this to you guys.
سالار نیامد
So again, this is Richie Medhurst was there. So you see all the people. So Piers Morgan doesn't want you to see this. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is why you can't just listen to, this is why we have to do our own research. Luckily, we know people that are there, that are in the region, right? So again, debunking the propaganda from mainstream media. Have to continue to do that. That is my goal.